But we haven't sinned. It's their sin, but we've been victimized by it. And so this has been a week in which we've seen original sin at work in our society. We've seen the sins of our past, of racism and slavery, and how that has made victims of people still today. The effect goes on. It makes victims of people. We've seen how prejudice and bias is the refusal to ask questions. It's the systematic refusal to ask questions. That's what bias is. And when white people can't ask questions of people of color, then that's a bias. And when we can't ask people, when Republicans can't ask questions that Republicans will ask, well, then that's a bias, because it's a systematic refusal to ask questions. It's a closing off instead of an openness to questions, and questions are what lead us to truth. And no one finds the truth by themselves. We can only find the truth when we have everybody's questions. Then we have full truth. We can use everyone's questions to find all of the answers, and we get to full truth. And this has been a week in which we have seen the effects of other people's sin victimize people who are innocent. We've seen the effects of original sin. And we've all been victimized by the sins of others in our lives. We don't get through life without being hurt by the sins of other people. That's what we call the effects of original sin. And we know that it's worse for people of color. That when they send their little children out the door, they know that in this country the odds have just been turned up that they might become victims of somebody else's sin, of somebody else's bias, of somebody else's closeness and refusal to be open. And we've seen the awfulness of sin. We've been able to look right into the eyes of the awfulness of sin that spirals out of control, that when people fight back with hatred and with murder and violence, then sin that was small starts to spiral and become enormous. So we've seen a pretty awful week in our country. And when I listen to the people in the media, everyone says, what are we going to do? What in the world do we do in the face of all of this violence and this leftover victimization from the sins of the past? What in the world are we going to do in the face of it? And last night, we did one of the things we have to do. We baptized 3 babies. We baptized 3 little beautiful babies. And at the next Mass, we're going to baptize 2 more little babies. And that's one of the things we have to do. Because the church says that it is baptism that cleanses us of the original sin, of the stain, of the victimization, of that. Baptism is the beginning of a process in which Jesus begins to set us free from the effects of original sin. So how does it work? I can tell you how it worked last night. Because what we said last night, and I shouted it a little bit louder than I should have, and so I'm trying to not do that today. What I wanted to say to the world, as we look into the face of sin and evil and violence and hatred, what I want to say to the world is, watch this. Watch this. Watch that. Watch this. This is one of the things we have to do in the face of evil. Just watch us, and we'll show you what you do in the face of evil. Watch us, Christians, at Mass. We may have to do a lot of other things, but I'll tell you what, right now, this is the thing we have to do in the face of evil. And last night, it included a baptism. So watch this. Watch this. This is what we did last night. We had 3 couples with beautiful children in the back of the church, at the door of the church. They had come to the door of the church to ask something of God's holy people. We processed back there, and we greeted them, and we welcomed them to come into the church. And it didn't matter what color their skin was. It didn't matter what their socioeconomic level was. It didn't matter what their educational level was. It didn't matter whether they were conservative or liberal. It didn't matter whether they were Democrats or it didn't matter. They were welcome at the door of this church to come in and become part of our community. That's something we have to do. We have to keep doing it. And we have to keep doing it and keep on doing it. And we invited them into the church. And they processed up here to hear the Word of God. And then we heard the Word of God proclaimed. And what does Jesus say? Jesus said what we want for those little babies. We want for those little babies that they will fall in love with God and make God the most important thing in their lives. And we promised that we would raise them up so that they would learn to love truth, and they would learn to love beauty, and they would learn to love goodness, so that they could fall in love with God when they were older, because God is ultimate truth and beauty and goodness. And then we hear the other thing that Jesus wants for those little babies, and it's what he wants for us, and it's what he wants for them. He wants them to know what a neighbor is. Because in Jesus' time and in our time, people think that a neighbor is somebody who's across the street, who looks like me and who thinks like me. They're right over there. That's my neighbor. And Jesus says, oh, no, 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 no. That's taking the idea of a neighbor and build a wall around it. And Jesus said, I'm going to take the idea of a wall, of a neighbor, and I'm going to blow the wall all the way out there. Because the neighbor is anybody I show mercy to. No, you want to know who your neighbor is? It's somebody who needs mercy, and you show them mercy. Now they're your neighbor. That blows the wall off of neighbor. There's no wall around it. It's whoever we need to show mercy to. Jesus blew it wide open. And isn't that what we want for these little children? We want them to be brought up in the faith of Jesus Christ, where they will fall in love with God. And they will be able to show mercy to anybody who needs it. Anybody who needs it just because they need it. Period. So their hearts will never grow hard, no matter how much they're hurt and touched by the evil of this world. But they will remain soft enough to be able to show mercy. And then we processed the families over to the font. And we didn't dribble a little bit of water on their heads like we used to baptize. Instead, we did what the church says to baptize now. We did it the way the church says to baptize now. Plunge them into the water or pour it over their heads. And the reason that the church says to do that now, it's a better sign of what baptism means. And you and I don't just baptize babies because it's not just for the babies. We baptize babies because it's for us, so that we can see them and we can go, well, what does my baptism mean? What in the world did it mean for me to be baptized? Did it mean that somebody just got me wet? Or does it mean that I have to live a baptismal life for the rest of my life? That my parents promised they would bring me up so I could live a baptismal life. And am I living a baptismal life? I was baptized. Am I living the life? Because the baptismal life is it's a way of living integrity. It's a way to be an authentic and integral person, because the baptismal way of life is to live a life in which our worst self is always going down to be drowned in the waters of baptism. We take our worst self and our worst instincts and we drown them. We push them down and drown them in the waters of baptism. And then we trust God to raise us the best self, the best instincts that we have, the highest that we can reach up to. We trust God to bring us up out of the water. We can breathe again and we're alive. We're truly alive. And we continually become a person of integrity by drowning our worst self and God bringing Jesus Christ, the risen one, raising up our best life, the best version of ourselves. And isn't that what we wanted for those little babies? That's what we baptized them into. And when we professed our faith with them and we asked them to profess that faith, we all stood and we professed it together. We said, this is what I believe. This is where I take a stand. In the face of evil, and it doesn't matter how much evil, and it doesn't matter what kind of evil, this is where I stand. And this is what I proclaim. And And then we brought them here in front of the altar, and they changed those little babies into their white garments, which is the most beautiful thing. Brand new Christians. We evangelized 3 new Catholics who became now the latest members of our Catholic Church. And we dressed them in white to show that they had a new dignity. They were to live the baptismal dignity of that death, of dying and rising their whole lives, of their worst self dying and their best self rising. They're going to live that their whole lives, just like us, along with us, because we promised we would live it with them. And then we gave them a candle, and we said, this is a little candle that's alive in your heart. This is the Spirit of God in your heart. Don't let this go out. It doesn't matter what else happens. It doesn't matter what evil we face. Don't let this light go out. And we poured oil, the oil of Jesus Christ over their heads, the consecrated oil that gives them a share, that said, you share in the dignity of a prophet and a priest and a king. Nobody should abuse you ever. You're a new creation. You're a new creation with a new dignity, and we promise to treat you that way. In the face of the evil of the world, that's what we did, and we said to the world, and we say it every time to the world, watch this. This is what we do in your face. No matter what you do, we do this. And we'll do it over again, and over again, and over again, and over again, and over again. No matter how bad the evil gets, no matter what it is, this is what we do in response. And then we brought them to the table, to the altar, where you and I will come in a moment. And we remembered what Jesus said. First of all, we remember what Jesus didn't say. Jesus didn't say, I want you to come here and do this, but first of all, I want you to have a big Congress, and I want you all to agree on what you're doing here first of all, and then come and do this. Jesus didn't say that. He didn't say, I want you to do this if you just, now, but I want you to all, I want you Republicans and you Democrats, I want you to get together and agree on what this means, and once you get it perfectly figured out, then I want you to do this. He didn't say, I want you to go to therapy and get all of your issues taken care of, and then I want you to come here and do this. He didn't say, I want you to get really uncomfortable and get all your racial issues situated, and once all of your racial issues are perfect, then I want you to come here and do this. Jesus didn't say any of that. What Jesus said was, do this. Just do it. I don't care if you disagree. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your issues are. Do it. That's what Jesus said. Do this. He just said, do it. It's the commandment. There's a lot of Jesus' commandments we may not be keeping. But this one, we're going to keep. Today and the next day and the next day. We just do this. He said, do it, and we just keep doing it. And he said, baptize people in the name of the Father, Son. We just keep doing it. So what do we do in the face of evil? We do this. And we say to the world, you want to know what our answer is today? There may be all kinds of things we need to do tomorrow at the different levels, at the social level and the cultural level. But right now, you want to know what we do in the face of evil? Watch this.